Right, no, welcome back to the channel. I'm just going to do a little revisit because it's Formula One weekend again, and I know this is a football channel, but I do like my Formula One as well. And I thought I wanted to talk about a particular subject that's going on in Formula One at the moment, and that is this Verstappen Hamilton situation in terms of what's happened at the Brazilian Grand Prix. Now, just to give a bit of context before I go into this, what essentially was happening was Hamilton and Verstappen at the time were first and second, or Verstappen was first, Hamilton was second. They're racing quite hard. Obviously, they're the two main rivals for the championship, and Hamilton was trying to get past Verstappen, and then an incident happened where Verstappen appeared to run Hamilton off the track. Now, at the time, the stewards didn't have a great deal of information available, which we now know. But what they decided, they noted the incident, they looked at it, and then they said no investigation necessary. However, new information has come out since then in terms of the cockpit view from Verstappen, which changes a lot of things. Now, a lot of people, particularly pundits and ex-racing drivers such as Julian Palmer and so on, have said that they thought it was very hard racing by Verstappen and a penalty probably was warranted. This was before the footage the new footage. Since the footage, they've actually said even more strongly that this should have been a penalty. Now, in terms of the rulings, because of obviously that race is finished and we're now about to get ready for the Qatar Grand Prix. But what the rules state is that they can actually go back to Brazil and impose penalties for that race still. So they can't. So even if they find if they do open up an investigation, and the grounds of which they can open an investigation up is if there's new evidence. There's evidence there that they didn't have available to them at the time of making their original decision on race day. Of course, Mercedes would argue, well, of course there is, because they've now got the cockpit view from Verstappen's car, which shows, and we'll go into that in a minute, as the angle of which Verstappen was turning into the bend, how much pressure he applied to the steering wheel to get that car turning left, what he would have likely or likely not have seen at the time, whether he knew Hamilton was there, and so on and so forth. All these things come within the cockpit, and so Mercedes would argue that this is clear footage or new evidence that could alter a decision in terms of what a steward or racing director could make. So firstly, let's have a look at the incident itself. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to play it from here. This is coming down the back straight. I'm just going to click play here. Action. We go back to there. Hamilton then come. Look at the line here. Verstappen's on the inside line, and he's covered there just in case Hamilton tried to dart up the inside. So Verstappen's pulled into the inside to try and cover himself. Although I think he's misjudged how far Hamilton's behind him, because what Hamilton has done is taken the outside line, which gives him a better angle coming down, and therefore he's getting a better. Now, we just go forwards here, just to the replays. Here we go. So here we see the as we saw, Hamilton coming down the straight, rear wing wide open, got the speed. There he is. Off he goes. Clearly gets past Verstappen, going to the apex. Clearly gets past Verstappen. But this is the bit that gets interesting for me. So Hamilton's got on the outside. Verstappen doing what he should be in the inside, leave it, brake late, try and turn that car. However, what happens here? There he's turning, the car is clearly moving to the left. Verstappen's clearly moving left, got the inside line, and he's basically trying to, he's taking the shorter distance. But then this is what happens here. He just straightens up, and I'll try and bring that again just back here, and watch it starts turning, and then it continues straight for a minute, and then eventually it runs off the road here. And look how far they are off the road. So I'm just going to bring it back here again, and we're going to go one more time, and then it turns, and then it straightens up. And Hamilton was about to turn in on Verstappen, because Verstappen was turning. He was obviously matching his turn to Verstappen's car, and then Verstappen straightens up, and Hamilton has to bail out. Verstappen clearly wasn't able to keep the car on the track at that point, and not just keep it on the track and hit the curbs, but he was obviously quite far off the track himself, forcing Hamilton quite wide himself. And off he goes, and so on. For this, no penalty was imposed. Now, as I said, the information that the stewards have was, they would have been able to see his braking pattern, his acceleration pattern, etc., etc., etc. And they would have just deemed it at that point, oh, well, you know, he's fighting, he's broken late, he's tried to brake hard, and he's just broken a little bit, you know, he's put his brakes on a little bit later than perhaps he would have liked. That's the way in which the stewards would have looked at it. But by all accounts, by looking at, you know, the fact that they didn't even investigate. I mean, I thought it was at least worthy of investigation. The fact they didn't investigate it was quite bizarre, and I think most people thought, I mean, but at the time, what could they have done? Well, they could have either given him black and white flags, or they could have given a 5-second penalty, which would be the typical standard, a 5-second penalty. And just for consistency, Lando Norris got a penalty for forcing Perez off the road in far less aggressive circumstances than that, and got a penalty. So in terms of consistency, I mean, this was more of a push off or shove off the track than what Norris had done, and Norris got a penalty for. And I think that's what a lot of people are looking and saying, well, hang on a minute, this seems to be sort of double standards here. So now let's have a look at the onboard footage that we got on I think it was Monday or Tuesday. And this is what Mercedes have taken to Qatar and have said, look, this is the new evidence that under the rules you need new evidence in order to reopen this investigation. Here's the new evidence. And at this moment in time, at the time of recording this, they're looking into it, but they haven't yet made a decision. So let's just have a look at the onboard footage. So this is Verstappen coming round. As you can see, he's coming around he's been around the S-bend, and this is the straight. And we just have a little look here, and you can see he's just had a little glance to the right. So he's looking into his right-hand mirror. Hopefully you can see my mouse. So a little turn to the right, and I'll just go back there, and you'll see in motion. There we go. His little turn to the right there. Do you see that? So he's turning to the right. He's looking in the mirrors. He knows Hamilton is behind him. He's aware that Hamilton's behind him. Then, if we watch, see, he moves to the left. He's trying to keep Hamilton out of his slipstream. And there we go. And there, Hamilton, look how actually far in front of he is. Verstappen, therefore, is unable to claim that he didn't know he was there. He can see him. He's seen him in the mirror from the start of the straight. And there he is right in front of him. You can't miss him. Let's be honest, you can't miss him. And then, as you can see, and this is where it's important to watch the steering wheel of because we can't, obviously, on this angle, we can't see what other information stewards had, such as the braking. You know, they have all telemetry, so they can see the accelerating, the braking, and so on and so forth. Now, let's have a look at the steering wheel here. As you can see, he's starting to turn there, and then it's locked in a bit harder there, but then he straightens up. If we go back just a fraction, there, he's not. He's there. Oh, let's try and get this right, shall we? Double clicking. There we go. So there, you would expect him to be really turning that car. If you're showing my line, he's expecting on it to keep on this darker side of this track here, because Hamilton's going to try and come around the outside here, but he doesn't. He just continues. And then listen until it gets to this point where he decides to lock the steering wheel hard. And the fact they can lock it as hard as he can shows how, look, there we go. Look how hard you can lock that. We'll just bring it back. Look how hard you can lock that. But look how where he is in the corner when he decides to lock the car that hard, to lock the steering wheel that hard. He could, in other words, he could have locked this a lot sooner. He had no intention of trying to keep to the inside curb, which is what his racing line was based on where Hamilton was. And as a result, it's come off. He then straightens up, knowing that Hamilton can't get past him. If Hamilton wants to get past him there, he's got to come around the outside here, which is, you know, so yeah, he's not made any, yeah. I think it speaks for itself, really. Yeah, looking at the footage there, I think it's pretty good proof, in my opinion, that that Verstappen he knew what he was doing. He knew that he was going to come across the track and prevent Hamilton from getting past. And by doing so, he has forced another driver off the track. Forcing a driver off the track is against the rules. It should be a 5-second penalty. Now, some will argue, well, hang on a minute, Hamilton went on, he did overtake him, he's gone on to win the race. And yes, that is true. Hamilton did go on to win the race. However, the reason this is crucial in terms of the championship is if a 5-second penalty is imposed, which is that if the stewards, and you know, I emphasise the word if the stewards deem that Verstappen did push Hamilton off the road and therefore have to imply a penalty, the chances are it's going to be a 5-second time penalty. That 5-second time penalty puts Verstappen from second to third. That means that he doesn't get the points of second place, he gets points of third place. He loses 3 points. That means his title leads will go from 14 points lead, which it currently stands, to just 11. That's key. And also in terms of constructors, which is also very key, or very tight. Again, Mercedes would gain 3 points because those 3 points would go to Bottas and off from Verstappen. So Mercedes, as a constructor, would gain 3 extra points over Red Bull as well. And constructors is where prize money is involved. So winning it and coming second is quite a difference in the prize money. So those 3 points could be crucial when it's only 3 races left. So Red Bull will argue that Verstappen took his foot off the gas once Hamilton got past. Verstappen took his foot off the gas, and actually, if they'd known it was going to be a 5-second penalty, that they could have opened a 5-second gap. The stewards would be able to easily look at that because they can look at lap timings between Bottas and Verstappen. I think they will find that there was a gap between Verstappen and Bottas that was closing before Hamilton made the pass. And so, if that makes sense, and also Mercedes can argue and say, well, Bottas also took his foot off the gas. They could argue as well. And also, I think in terms of Red Bull, I think that would be quite naive to suggest that, oh well, they must have known Mercedes were going to come back with this. They were going to, especially after Mercedes with Verstappen touching the rear wing of Hamilton before the race and all the shenanigans that led to essentially a disqualification from qualifying for Hamilton. And so, in that respect, I think they were a little bit naive to think Mercedes wouldn't have challenged this, that cockpit will eventually become available and that they would use that. And I would have personally, I think, this is what I mean. That's why I don't believe that he had taken his foot off the gas, because I think they wouldn't have been that stupid. Surely it would have been a case of, look, Verstappen, you need to push. We need a 5-second gap in case there's retrospective penalties later on. That would have been a common sense thing to do. But it appears that like I said, I think that's what they have done. So I think if 5-second penalty was imposed, I don't think Red Bull can really argue it that much. Let's look at the race coming up ahead. So as you can see, this is the Qatar track, and as you can see, it's got a massive 1 kilometer straight, which is the pit straight. It's it's going to be a very power hungry circuit. It's the first time it's raced here. Be interesting to see. We're expecting overtaking to be possible because of the fact that it's got a 1 kilometer straight and it's got DRS down that straight. If you can't overtake with a DRS down a 1 kilometer straight, then what's the point, basically? So this is, and it's because it's a power hungry circuit. We know Hamilton had changed his engine before the Brazilian Grand Prix, which led to the 5-second penalty, or 5-place penalty rather, to be imposed on him for the race. And of course, after Qatar, they've then got Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi. Let's have a quick look at their circuits. Okay, another new circuit for Saudi Arabia and Jeddah, and as you can see, the pit straight is quite it's another long pit straight. This one is quite a power hungry circuit as well. 50 laps on there. It's quite a long circuit in 6.1 kilometers. So that'd be an interesting race. And then of course Abu Dhabi to finish off. Now with Abu Dhabi, for those who know the race, this is actually a they've altered the track slightly, and they've altered it to make it more overtaking friendly. But what you'll notice is there's quite 2 very long straights here as well. So overtaking should be easier at Abu Dhabi this year. This was what they've intended to do in terms of what they've done with the track itself. Now, as I said, Hamilton's changed his engine, so he's got a fresh engine for these last 3 power-hungry circuits. I'm wondering whether or not Verstappen is going to take a similar approach, whether Red Bull are going to think that they'll feel that they need an engine for these as well. If they're going to do it, I suspect they'll make that change and have to take a 5-place penalty, probably in the next race. I suspect they'll look and see what's going on in free practice 1. They'll look at timings and how likely it is that they're going to finish either behind or in front of the Mercedes in qualifying. And because I think the Red Bull will feel they need track position. Red Bull are not as quick as Mercedes in the straight line speed, and if they'll feel they need track position, it's going to be harder for them to overtake Mercedes than it is for Mercedes to overtake them down that long straight. But it's going to be an interesting race. But I think Hamilton as well does need Bottas to be involved here as well. But Bottas, I know he's not had the best season in the Mercedes car. He needs to be there to support Hamilton, because Hamilton's too often been fighting both Red Bulls, and the reason that's key. Just to give an example, that if you've got, for example, Verstappen first, Hamilton second, and Perez third, is they can use Perez to force Hamilton to do things like pitting early. For example, they could bring in Perez and put him, and play the undercut, which would then put him in front of Hamilton, and then get Perez to slow Hamilton down, so Verstappen can have a longer stint, come out much more further in front of Hamilton, for example. There's ways in which you can play your tactics if you've got two cars, because you can use the other car to make the other, to make your competitive driver or competitive car do things that you want it to do, and you then control the race in that respect. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. Should he receive a penalty for this? And who do you think is going to win? Both the championship and Qatar the Grand Prix. In my opinion, these last three tracks suit Mercedes more. Mercedes look very quick in Brazil as well, and I think Red Bull know that they've got a bit of a job on their hands now. They're gonna have to consider how they're going to play these. It's going to be a tactical battle. But they do have the points on the board. And as any football manager would say in terms of football, it's rather points on the board than games in hand. And essentially what Red Bull do have here is they do have the points on the board. Anyway, take care all. And I hope you've all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to smash that like button. Don't forget to subscribe. And I'll see you all again soon.